cold gust of wind swept through the city, weaving between pedestrians hurrying down the crowded sidewalk. The streetlights flickered as the evening chill set in, casting long shadows on the damp pavement. Among the rush of bodies, Ethan Carter, a 32-year-old software engineer, moved with urgency, his neatly combed brown hair slightly tousled by the wind. His deep green eyes were focused ahead, lost in thought. Deadlines, overdue rent, and an overwhelming sense of exhaustion weighed on him like a heavy coat. His grip tightened around his worn-out leather bag as he approached the subway entrance. Just as he stepped onto the first stair, something made him pause. There, just a few feet away, a black leather wallet lay abandoned on the ground, its edges frayed, the gold-embossed initials DM catching the dim light from the flickering street lamp. For a second, Ethan glanced around. People passed by in a blur, too busy to notice. The wallet could belong to anyone. His first instinct was to ignore it. He wasn't in the mood to play Good Samaritan. But then, against his better judgment, he knelt down and picked it up. As he flipped it open, he found a worn-out driver's license, some crumpled dollar bills, and a faded photograph tucked into the inner pocket. The edges of the photo were frayed, the ink slightly smudged from years of being handled. The image was of a young boy, no older than 6, standing beside a woman with soft brown eyes and an affectionate smile. Her hand rested protectively on the boy's shoulder. There was something hauntingly familiar about the way they looked at each other. Like they had been through something together, something profound. Ethan's heart tightened. He swallowed hard, shifting on his feet as the cold wind pressed against his skin. He knew that kind of look. It was the look he used to give his own mother before she passed away. For a fleeting moment, temptation crept in. He wasn't proud of it, but money was tight. Really tight. The bills in his pocket barely covered rent, and the few folded bills inside the wallet could buy him a much-needed meal. Who would even know? But then his eyes drifted back to the photo. The boy's face, the woman's gentle smile, and suddenly it wasn't just a wallet anymore. It was a story. Someone's life. Someone who might be desperately looking for it. Ethan exhaled sharply, rubbing his fingers over the worn leather. He had a choice to make. Keeping the money would be easy. Returning the wallet, however, that would change everything. Ethan stood motionless, his fingers tracing the worn leather of the wallet. The weight of his choice pressed against his chest like a heavy stone. The wind howled through the alley, pushing him toward a decision he wasn't ready to make. His stomach growled, a sharp reminder of the ramen packets waiting at home, the pile of unpaid bills on his kitchen table, the mounting stress that had begun to feel permanent. Keeping the money would be easy. No one was watching. No one would ever know. But then he looked at the photograph again. The boy's wide, hopeful eyes, the woman's kind, knowing smile. It felt personal now. This wasn't just cash. This was someone's memory, someone's attachment to a past Ethan knew nothing about. With a deep breath, he turned the driver's license over, scanning the name. Daniel Mercer. The name wasn't familiar, but something about it felt significant, like a puzzle piece waiting to click into place. He checked the address, just a few blocks away. A short walk. It would be so easy to just put the wallet in his pocket, forget about it, and move on. But Ethan had spent too much of his life trying to ignore his conscience. And he had learned the hard way that doing the right thing, even when it's inconvenient, was the only way to quiet the voice in the back of his mind. He exhaled, made his choice, and started walking. The city buzzed around him. Car horns, muffled conversations, the rhythmic beeping of a crosswalk signal. The further he walked, the heavier the wallet seemed to feel in his hand. He kept his pace steady, but 1,000 what-ifs swirled in his mind. What if Daniel Mercer didn't even live there anymore? What if this was a waste of time? What if he was about to walk into something he wasn't prepared for? Ethan almost turned back. Almost. But then he reached the address. A modest, 2-story brick house with a rusted mailbox and a dim porch light glowing in the night. He hesitated at the steps. Should he knock? Should he just leave the wallet in the mailbox? Before he could decide, the front door creaked open, and the person standing there stopped him in his tracks. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with sunken cheeks, tired hazel eyes, and a thin frame wrapped in a worn-out cardigan. His frail fingers trembled as he gripped the doorknob, his gaze filled with a quiet kind of sorrow, one that spoke of years of waiting, of hope that had faded but never quite died. Ethan hesitated, suddenly unsure of what to say. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice hoarse and weary, as if he hadn't spoken much in a long time. Ethan cleared his throat and held up the wallet. "I found this on the street. It has your name on the ID." For a second, the man just stared, his lips parting slightly as if the very sight of the wallet had stolen his breath. His fingers twitched, his eyes darting between Ethan and the item in his hand. Then, with a shaky inhale, he reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed against the worn leather, a sharp gasp escaped his lips. His body stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the wallet like a lifeline. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes welling with something deeper than gratitude. Ethan took a cautious step back. "Are you okay?" The old man didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the wallet with trembling hands, his breath hitching when he saw the faded photograph still tucked inside. A pained, disbelieving whisper left his lips. "He kept it." Ethan frowned. "I'm sorry, do you know who this belongs to?" The man lifted his watery gaze. This was my son's." The weight of his words settled in Ethan's chest like a stone. "Son?" The old man turned the wallet over in his hands, his thumb running over the gold-embossed initials. His shoulders shook, his body barely holding itself together under the weight of the moment. "I lost Daniel 10 years ago." The words hit Ethan like a freight train. 10 years? A cold shiver ran through his spine. This wallet wasn't just lost. It had been missing for an entire decade. The old man, Henry Mercer, took a deep breath, gripping the doorframe for support. He disappeared on a rainy night, walked out that door, and never came back. His voice cracked, the memory still raw, still clawing at his heart after all these years. Ethan stood frozen, processing the weight of what he had just uncovered. Henry gently traced the edges of the photograph, his hands visibly trembling. "I didn't think I'd ever see this again." Ethan swallowed hard. I'm so sorry." Henry gave a weak smile, though his eyes were still glassy. "You didn't just return a wallet, son. You returned a part of my boy I thought I'd lost forever." Ethan's mind raced. How had Daniel's wallet ended up on a random street, untouched, after 10 years? Why now? And most importantly, what really happened to Daniel Mercer? Henry seemed to read his thoughts because, with a heavy sigh, he whispered, "I never got my answers." Ethan's heart pounded. Something told him this story wasn't over yet. Ethan's pulse quickened. A missing son, a decade-old wallet, a grieving father still clinging to hope. The weight of it all pressed against his chest. Henry Mercer's hands trembled as he clutched the wallet, his breath uneven. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken words, questions begging for answers. Finally, his voice cracked through the stillness. Where did you find this?" Ethan hesitated. "It was lying in an alley near Westfield Avenue." Henry's eyes widened. "Westfield?" He took a shaky step back, gripping the doorframe for support. That's where Daniel was last seen." The revelation sent a chill down Ethan's spine. His fingers unconsciously curled into a fist. What were the odds? How did a wallet, missing for 10 years, suddenly reappear in the same place its owner was last seen? Henry's lips trembled as he whispered, "I searched that entire street for weeks." His voice was barely audible now, a fragile thread unraveling. "The police? They said there was no sign of him. Nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air." But the wallet had been there all along. Henry sank onto a nearby chair on his porch, his frail hands running through his graying hair. His entire body seemed to shrink under the weight of the past. "For years I prayed that one day I'd get an answer." His voice was distant, as if speaking to someone no longer there. And then, people stopped looking, stopped asking. His gaze lifted to meet Ethan's, his expression raw, desperate. But not a day went by that I didn't wonder if he was out there, if he needed me. Ethan felt something stir inside him, a fire, an urgency he couldn't explain. He had returned a wallet, but in doing so, he had opened a door that had been shut for far too long. Henry traced the edges of the photograph inside. "If this survived 10 years, he murmured, maybe he did too." Ethan's breath caught. Was it possible? Henry's frail fingers fumbled inside the wallet, searching. Then suddenly, a small folded piece of paper slipped out. Ethan's heart pounded as Henry unfolded it with trembling hands. The paper was yellowed with time, the edges frayed. Henry squinted at the faded ink, his voice cracking as he read aloud. "Dad, I need to tell you something." The words sent a jolt through Ethan's chest. Henry inhaled sharply, his hands shaking so badly the letter almost fell from his grip. His eyes scanned the page, his lips moving without sound. Then suddenly, his face paled and his breath hitched in his throat. Ethan leaned forward. "What does it say?" Henry's eyes flicked to him, wide, panicked, disbelieving. It says he was afraid that someone was following him." Ethan's stomach twisted. Henry clutched his chest, his entire body trembling. "He tried to tell me, and I didn't see it." His voice broke. "Oh my God, I didn't see it." The letter crinkled in his grip as he choked on the words. Ethan swallowed hard. Whatever had happened to Daniel Mercer, it wasn't just a disappearance. It was something darker, something unfinished. Henry wiped his tear-streaked face and looked up at Ethan. There was something new in his eyes now, something fierce, something desperate. "This means something," Henry whispered. "You were meant to find this." Ethan felt his pulse thundering in his ears. He had come here to return a wallet. But now, standing in front of this grieving father, he realized he couldn't walk away. Not when the truth had been waiting for 10 years to be found. And not when Daniel Mercer still might be out there. Ethan's chest tightened. Daniel Mercer had been afraid. Someone had been following him. And then he vanished. Henry's hands clenched around the fragile letter, his knuckles white. The years of uncertainty, the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, all of it came rushing back sharper than ever. His lips parted, but no words came. Ethan felt a pulse of urgency. This wasn't just a lost and found moment. This was a trail, a forgotten clue that had been waiting a decade to be uncovered. Ethan scanned the letter over Henry's shoulder. The handwriting was hurried, uneven, as if written in a moment of fear. "Dad, if anything happens to me, check the sentence cut off. The ink bled into the paper, as if the pen had been dragged away mid-stroke. Ethan's breath hitched. "Check the what?" Henry's eyes darted frantically over the page, his fingers trembling as he traced the words. The letter ended too soon. No signature, no explanation. Henry exhaled shakily. He was trying to tell me something. Ethan swallowed hard, and he never got the chance. Henry stood abruptly, his frail frame swaying slightly. The desperation in his gaze was haunting. "Westfield Avenue," he whispered. "That's where the wallet was found. That's where he was last seen." His voice hardened, his sorrow sharpening into determination. "That's where I'm going." Ethan hesitated. "Are you sure?" Henry's eyes, though aged and weary, held a fierce resolve. "For 10 years I've done nothing but wait." He clutched the letter. "I won't waste another second." Westfield Avenue was eerily quiet, the streetlights flickering as Henry and Ethan stood at the alley's entrance. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement, the wind whispering through the narrow passage. Henry's fingers brushed against the old brick wall, his gaze searching, desperate. Every inch of this place was burned into his memory. The last place Daniel had been seen, the place where he had vanished. Then, Henry froze, his breath hitched, his fingers trembled as they traced over a small carved engraving in the brick. Ethan leaned in, his heart pounding. The initials DM were scratched into the stone. Daniel Mercer. And beneath it, an arrow. Ethan and Henry exchanged a look. The arrow pointed downward, toward a loose, broken piece of pavement near the wall. Henry's breath came in shallow gasps. "He left this for me." Ethan crouched down, fingers digging into the dirt, pulling at the stone. It came loose with a sharp crack. And beneath it, a small, rusted tin. Henry's hands shook violently as he reached for it. With bated breath, he pried it open. Inside, a second letter, yellowed, a decade old, and sealed shut. Henry clutched the letter to his chest, tears slipping down his weathered face. "He wanted me to find this." His voice broke. "He never stopped trying to reach me." Ethan swallowed hard, watching as Henry's fingers hovered over the fragile paper. What did Daniel leave behind? What truth had been buried for 10 years? And most haunting of all, was it already too late? What do you think Daniel's final message will reveal? If this was your father, would you open the letter? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the past isn't as far away as we think.